Imagine being handed the deed to a vast, fertile kingdom, like it's everything you've ever dreamed of. But there is a terrifying catch in the fine print. To claim your new home, you're explicitly commanded to completely annihilate the current occupants.
Right. No treaties, no mercy.
Exactly. Welcome to the deep dive. And before we really plunge into this incredibly intense material today, I just want to take a moment to say that I truly hope God blesses your day and blesses your entire week.
Yeah, we are definitely going to need a clear, focused mind for what we're unpacking today.
For sure. Because today's mission takes us straight into some serious tension. We're pulling insights from two really comprehensive Portuguese study Bibles, the Holman and the NABA study editions.
And we're specifically zeroing in on Deuteronomy chapter 7.
Right. And you read this chapter, and I mean, the whiplash is real. In one breath, you're reading the most relentless, scorched earth rules of ancient warfare imaginable. And then you turn the page, and you're suddenly reading these profound, poetic expressions of divine grace and unmerited love.
It's jarring, honestly. It is arguably one of the most difficult texts to wrestle with in the entire historical record.
So our goal is to figure out how these two extremes, exist in the exact same document.
Well, to even begin making sense of that, we really have to look at where the Israelites are standing in the narrative.
It's setting the stage. Right.
Exactly. They are literally on the border of Canaan, the Promised Land. And they are a generation of former slaves, essentially just nomads at this point.
Right, not exactly a standing army.
Not at all. And standing between them and this land are 7 established nations. The text actually names them: the Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites.
And the text really doesn't shy away from the disparity here, right? It notes that these 7 nations are vastly larger and significantly more militarized than the Israelites.
Oh yeah, they are outmatched in every conventional sense.
Which brings us to the massive elephant in the room. I mean, before we can even get to the beautiful theology of grace later in the chapter, we have to look at the opening directive God gives to this underdog army.
The command for total destruction.
Yeah, total destruction. Show no pity, make no treaties, absolutely no intermarriage. I'll just be honest. Reading this today, it sounds like an ancient blueprint for ethnic cleansing or, some extreme demand for racial purity.
Yeah, that's a very natural reaction.
How does the scholarship we're looking at even handle something that harsh?
It's the single most common and frankly most justified objection modern readers have. But when you dig into the historical context provided in our sources, they make a crucial distinction.
Oh, okay. What kind of distinction?
They note that this command was not about ethnic or racial purity. It was entirely about religious purity.
Okay, I really have to push back on that. Swapping ethnic purity for religious purity doesn't automatically make this palatable.
Fair point.
I mean, you're still talking about eradicating entire populations based on their belief systems. How does this scholarship justify that leap?
That is the exact right question to ask. To understand it, we have to kind of strip away our modern concept of religion.
How so?
Well, today, we view religion as a private weekend activity, right? Or a personal philosophy. But in the ancient Near East, religion was the entire operating system of a civilization.
Like it dictated everything.
Everything. The economy, the legal system, human rights, all of it. And our sources introduce a specific Hebrew concept operating here called cherem.
Cherem, spell that out for me. What does that actually mean in practice?
It translates roughly to the ban or something devoted to destruction. But the mechanism of cherem is fascinating. It basically means taking something entirely out of human use and turning it over exclusively to God.
So it's not like a standard military strategy.
Exactly. It wasn't a strategy for expanding an empire or acquiring wealth, because under cherem, the conquering army wasn't allowed to keep the spoils. The idea was absolute separation.
Wait, so it's not a war of conquest for profit? Israel isn't supposed to get rich off this.
Far from it. The research points out that Israel is functioning in this specific moment as an instrument of divine justice.
An instrument of justice. Okay, untack that.
These 7 nations aren't just innocent indigenous people being displaced. According to the broader biblical narrative, they are facing a deferred judicial sentence for generations of really severe corruption.
The notes mention something about Genesis, right?
Yes, Genesis 15:16. God tells Abraham, and this is 400 years prior to this moment, that the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete.
Meaning God had been delaying this judgment for centuries.
Yes, God literally waited 400 years. But by the time we get to Deuteronomy 7, the threshold has been crossed.
And then we have to look at what that iniquity actually entailed, right?
Absolutely. We're talking about the Canaanite fertility cults. These systems institutionalized temple prostitution, extreme exploitation, and most horrifyingly rampant child sacrifice.
Wow. Which fundamentally changes the framing here. Pity, in this context, wouldn't be an act of mercy. It would be a failure to stop an atrocity.
It would compromise justice completely. And pragmatically, it would introduce a contagion into the Israelite camp. The text explicitly commands the Israelites to smash their sacred pillars and cut down their Asherah poles.
I saw that term in the notes. What exactly is an Asherah pole?
Asherah was a really prominent fertility goddess in the Canaanite pantheon. Her symbols were these massive carved wooden poles set up alongside altars.
Got it.
So the command to destroy them and ban intermarriage was really a survival mechanism for Israel's covenant.
Because marriage wasn't just about two people back then.
Right. In the ancient world, you didn't just marry an individual. You married into their family's religious and economic system. You essentially brought their gods into your tent.
So the real fear is assimilation. If they don't draw a hard, violent line, they will just become the eighth corrupt nation of Canaan.
History actually proves this fear was entirely justified. The notes point to a major figure later in the timeline who completely ignored this exact rule.
King Solomon, right?
Yes. He was supposedly the wisest king, yet he thought he could, manage the risk. He married foreign wives to secure political alliances.
And they brought their belief systems with them.
Right into the royal court. The scholarship points to 1 Kings chapter 11. Solomon starts building high places for these foreign gods, and it basically rots the nation from the inside out.
Oh.
It leads directly to the splitting of the kingdom and their eventual exile. Solomon's downfall is the historical proof of why Deuteronomy 7 was so uncompromising. The assimilation was a snare.
That context is incredibly helpful, but it introduces a massive logical gap for me.
Okay, what is it?
Let's assume God needs a human instrument of justice to dismantle these corrupt empires. Why pick Israel? I mean, if you are orchestrating the takedown of 7 powerful, fortified nations, you hire the ancient equivalent of the Navy SEALs, right? Israel is a disorganized group of desert nomads who used to make bricks in Egypt.
It is a profound paradox. By all military logic, they are the absolute worst possible candidates for the job.
I was reading verse 7, and I tried to come up with an analogy for this. It's almost like, well, imagine you're standing outside the most exclusive, high-stakes boardroom in the world.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You have no credentials. You have no money. You are the least qualified person in the building, yet the CEO walks out, bypasses all the billionaires, and hands you the keys to the company.
That's a great way to put it.
Not because you earned it, but simply because he made a promise to your great-grandfather and he refuses to break his word. The text literally highlights that they were the fewest of all peoples.
Your analogy touches on the very mechanism of grace here. The Holman notes introduce this brilliant Hebrew word to explain why they were chosen. Segula.
Segula, translating to what?
It translates to a treasured possession, or like the personal property of a king.
Okay.
In the ancient Near East, kings made treaties with powerful vassal states based on what those states could offer them. Troops, taxes, resources, whatever.
A transactional relationship.
Exactly. But God subverts that entire system. He makes the covenant with the weakest nation, emphasizing that his choice is completely divorced from their merit.
So their holiness, their status as a chosen people, has absolutely nothing to do with their moral superiority or their military might.
None whatsoever. It is anchored entirely in God's unmerited affection and the ancient oath. He swore to their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
That's fascinating.
The scholarship also highlights a stunning contrast in verses 9 and 10 to illustrate how this covenant operates. God promises to keep his covenant and his mercy for 1,000 generations for those who love him.
1,000 generations. I mean, that's essentially pointing to an infinite timeline.
It signifies limitless grace. But it's immediately juxtaposed with the reality of his justice in verse 10. For those who hate him, he does not delay. He repays them directly to their face, making them perish.
It's the tension of the entire chapter wrapped up in 2 verses. Infinite generational mercy for the covenant keepers and direct, unyielding justice for the corrupt.
Exactly.
But if we, pull this down from the grand theological heights, how does this covenant actually function for an ancient Israelite family? Like, what does this blessing look like on a Tuesday in the dirt?
The study Bibles are actually great at mapping out the physical realities of this.
Yeah.
The covenant wasn't just about, like, going to heaven when you die. It was intensely practical.
What do they focus on?
The NLA notes focus on the agricultural triad promised in the text: grain, wine, and oil.
Why those three specifically?
Because in an ancient agrarian economy, those three crops represent total economic stability.
Oh, I see.
Grain for daily sustenance, wine for joy and safe hydration, and oil for cooking, medicine, and light. If you have those three, your civilization survives.
That covers all the bases.
God also explicitly promises to remove barrenness from both humans and livestock.
Which, in an era before modern medicine or, social safety nets, barrenness wasn't just an emotional tragedy, it was an economic death sentence. You needed offspring to work the land and care for you in old age.
Exactly. The blessing is fundamentally about the preservation of life. And that ties directly into another fascinating promise. The text says God will protect them from the terrible diseases of the Egyptians.
Yeah, I noticed that. It's a very specific callback.
It's a massive psychological shift. This is a population that lived through the plagues of Egypt. They knew intimately what those diseases looked like.
Terrifying stuff.
Right. So the note suggests this promise operates as a profound reassurance. The same God who wielded sickness as a weapon to break their oppressors will now act as a shield to protect their health in Canaan.
Okay, so if physical health and economic stability are guaranteed to sustain them, how does the actual military conquest happen? Because this is where the text gets really strange.
Oh, you're talking about verse 20.
Yes. Verse 20 mentions God sending Vespoin's hornets ahead of them to wipe out the survivors hiding in the land. Like, are we talking about biological insect warfare? Is God sending a literal plague of angry bees as military backup?
It's such a vivid image, isn't it? And the Holman researchers address this directly. While a literal swarm of insects isn't outside the realm of possibility in biblical narratives, the overwhelming scholarly consensus is that hornets is functioning as a metaphor.
A metaphor for what kind of mechanism?
Psychological warfare. It represents divine panic, a pervasive, stinging terror that spreads through the Canaanite populations ahead of the Israelite army.
Oh, wow.
It's the dread that causes enemy forces to abandon their fortifications and break ranks before a single sword is even swung.
That makes total sense. You break the enemy's mind before you even engage their troops.
Exactly.
But even with that advantage, there's another detail about the conquest that really caught my attention. Verse 22.
Right, the pacing of it.
Yeah. God says he will drive these nations out, but he's going to do it little by little. Why not just sweep the board clean in one miraculous afternoon?
That is perhaps the most pragmatic piece of theology in the entire book. What did you make of the reason the text gives?
Well, it says, if the destruction happens too quickly, the wild animals of the field will multiply and overwhelm them. It's breathtakingly practical.
It really is.
We always picture divine intervention as this instant magical flash of lightning that perfectly solves our problems. But here, sudden victory would actually create a massive, unmanageable vacuum.
It's divine ecosystem management. If Israel inherits hundreds of empty, ruined cities overnight, they don't have the population density to maintain them.
The infrastructure would just collapse.
Completely. Nature would reclaim the ruins and predators would move in. God is pacing their victory to match their capacity to actually inhabit the blessing.
It completely reframes how we think about delayed gratification. Sometimes the delay isn't a denial. It's protection from a victory you aren't ready to sustain.
That is a phenomenal insight.
Yeah.
But we have to look at the warning that comes immediately after that. Even with God meticulously pacing the war, there is a severe trap waiting for them in the aftermath of these battles.
Right, the snare.
The snare of the anathema.
Let's break down the psychology of verses 25 and 26. Because human nature hasn't changed in 3,000 years.
Very true.
Picture an Israelite soldier. He's just survived a brutal siege. He walks into a conquered Canaanite temple and sees a towering wooden idol covered in thick, heavy silver and gold.
Okay.
His rational mind says, look, I know the god is fake, the wood is worthless, but the gold covering it, that has massive purchasing power. Why let perfectly good capital go to waste?
It is a completely rational economic justification.
But the text violently rejects that logic. Yeah. It doesn't call it a financial opportunity, it calls it an abomination. Why?
Because of the mechanism of cherem we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
The scholarship emphasizes that the rule of the ban was absolute.
No exceptions.
None. The notes point out that bringing a devoted, cursed thing into your home isn't just breaking a rule. It is a contagion.
A contagion.
The theology here is terrifyingly literal. If you touch the cursed thing, you become the cursed thing. You are assimilated into the destruction.
It's almost like handling highly radioactive material. You don't try to repurpose uranium you found in a reactor meltdown to heat your house. You bury it, or it will destroy your family.
That is the exact ancient mindset. And there's a horrifying historical record of this playing out. The Holman notes bring up the story of a man named Achan.
What happened with Achan? Walk me through that.
It happens in the book of Joshua, right after the miraculous conquest of Jericho. The city was placed under cherem, total ban.
Okay.
But Achan walks into the ruins, sees the devoted things, and his scarcity mindset takes over. He covets a beautiful Babylonian garment, some silver, and a heavy wedge of gold. He steals them and buries them under the floor of his tent.
He brings the radioactive material right into his living room.
And the fallout is catastrophic. Israel goes to fight their next battle, a minor skirmish against a small town called A, and they are completely routed.
Oh, wow.
36 Israelite soldiers are killed. The entire nation's covenant protection is voided because of the contagion Achan brought into the camp.
That's devastating.
It ultimately results in Achan and his entire family facing the exact destruction meant for Jericho.
That is chilling, and it forces you to look at the root motivation. Why would a soldier who just watched the God of the universe miraculously bring down the walls of Jericho risk his life to hoard a brick of cursed gold?
What's your theory?
The only answer is fear. Deep down, he doesn't actually trust that the grain, the wine, and the oil are going to be there tomorrow, so he tries to secure his own future with the enemy's resources.
You've hit on the core psychological battle of the chapter. The outward war is against the Canaanites, but the inward war is against fear and amnesia.
Amnesia, yeah.
The NAA researchers make a brilliant connection to verses 17 and 18 regarding this. The text anticipates that the Israelites are going to look at these massive nations and feel terrified.
And what is the prescribed antidote to that fear? Because it isn't hoarding wealth or building bigger weapons.
The antidote to fear is memory. The text commands them, do not be afraid, but remember well what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all Egypt. Remember the signs, the wonders, the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm.
So, synthesizing everything we've looked at today from these sources, Deuteronomy 7 really defies being put into a neat little box.
No, it certainly does.
It isn't just an archaic ledger of brutal battles. It is a highly complex, layered portrait of how divine justice operates in human history.
Yeah, we see the heavy practical demands of maintaining a covenant in a corrupt world.
Right. And underneath the jarring commands of the ban, we find the mechanism of Segula, a people chosen, protected, and loved entirely without merit.
It forces the reader to sit with the tension of a God who is holy enough to demand the absolute eradication of systemic evil, yet merciful enough to extend grace for 1,000 generations to a people who didn't earn it.
And I want to leave you, listening right now, with a final thought to mull over. It builds directly off that insight about the antidote to fear.
Yeah, the idea of remembering.
Exactly. The study notes make it clear that the ancient Israelites defeated their panic simply by remembering the past interventions of God. It really makes you wonder about the architecture of our own modern anxieties.
How so?
Well, how much of our dread about the future, our fear of economic ruin, or our panic over the obstacles in front of us is simply a product of our own amnesia? If we cultivated a relentless habit of remembering the signs and wonders in our own past, like the moment's provision arrived when the math said it was impossible, would we face the giants in our current landscape any differently?
It completely shifts the paradigm, right? From focusing on the size of the obstacle to the track record of the one who promised to overcome it.
Something to really think about as you go through your week. And that wraps up our deep dive into Deuteronomy 7. Thank you for taking the time to explore this incredibly dense, fascinating text with us. And as always, God blesses all the listeners. Take care.